Beautiful.
That would have been nice if I finished legitimately.
Hey, I'm here with Gregg Belisle-Chi, who is the latest person to release a record on AGS Recordings. Welcome to Guitar Unlimited. And we're going to talk with Gregg about his unique approach to the guitar. And that's not something I say to everybody. You actually have a unique approach to the guitar. And that's the first thing I want to talk about. When I listen to your new record, I'm pretty surprised the whole time because I had no idea how you came up with your ideas. And I would like you to talk about your approach to building these compositions on the new record. Maybe it would be useful if you just played a bit of one of them and talked about your process in composing.
Yeah. I think in records that I've done before and kind of bigger writing projects that I've done, I kind of came at the writing process with kind of a big plan, or like a lot of ideas sketched, or I still do use really, really big manuscript paper just so I can kind of sketch all over the place and then refine, move pieces around here and there. It's sort of a composition process that I got from some pretty heavy classical composers that I studied with, and then I talked to Ben Monder about writing in that particular way. But this record in particular, I kind of came at it with no plan at all. Like I just it was a lot more of an intuitive writing process. And really more following the ear and the hands rather than trying to foresee how a piece was going to go. So a lot of that really just came from improvising. If I would start, I would just pick up the guitar and play something like which became one of the pieces on the record, and that just came from like kind of an A minor idea, and then going to an E flat chord, So I guess thinking it also came from like a desire to work on things that I didn't feel like I really had a total control over, or something that I wanted to integrate more into my playing, namely wider interval stuff. So there's a lot of ninths, there's that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that sounds great. How did you end up building that intervallic stuff into your playing?
I would just write on, whenever I was practicing, I would pull out some manuscript paper and just write a bunch of exercises that really exploited sevenths or ninths or different combinations of intervals. So maybe one day it would be like fifths and sixths, so the exercise would be something like being comfortable kind of anywhere on the neck and just really trying to make small ideas bigger ideas. How much can I pull from this one small idea, just the idea of playing sevenths or ninths or combinations of intervals.
Wow, that's really neat. Show us just a little more of some of that intervallic stuff. It sounds so cool.
Sure.
And it's a great way, I know, to trigger composing. I've done that before, but don't know if a lot of people do it.
Everybody has their own path in how they want to get at the things, the musical ideas they want to tackle. That was just my way, and maybe some of it came from, I don't know. It's funny because, a lot of times when we're working on jazz playing or whatever, we think a lot about major seventh chords, right? Or major seventh. Right? So, and that's sort of like the go-to into practicing your arpeggios. But rarely do we go like, so, I'm just moving major seventh arpeggios around the neck and just trying to make it a little bit more melodic by incorporating some stepwise motion as well. So. I mean, at first when I was working on this, it sounded bad, it's like, because anytime you try something new, it's gonna sound a little wonky and
I think that's always good to remember.
Totally, yeah. I mean, that's sort of
be too discouraged.
Well, that's the zone that I want to live in too, where I think David Bowie said something like, when you feel like your toes are looking for the bottom of the surface, you're treading water and your toes are looking for the bottom. That's kind of the place that he wanted to be. Creatively.
Yeah, I feel that way all the time, but it's good to be reminded of making it conscious.
Yeah. Putting it at the forefront was, I mean, luckily, I practice in the privacy of my home, so it was
well, yeah, lucky for all of us.
Yeah, right.
So, all right, when you were, did you grow up in Seattle or just go to college there?
I went to college there.
So, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Eastern Washington, a little town called Richland, Washington.
Right. So I know you studied with Kung Wu out there, who has, been a colleague of mine in the past, and I know a great teacher. Tell me about some of the people who supported you as mentors in this, kind of original path that you're on.
Kung was kind of the first. I had really good teachers before, but Kung was the one who, I always feel like Kung saw me before I saw myself.
Really? Give me an example of that, because that's a great quality in a teacher.
When I did my master's at the University of Washington with Kung, and before that I was at Cornish College of the Arts.
Oh, yes.
And, Cornish is historically renowned for having some very forward-thinking musicians and teachers. Ralph Towner was there for Gary Peacock. I got to spend time with Julian Priester when he was around. Unfortunately, I feel like during my tenure there, sort of the status quo for the jazz department was let's get a bunch of functioning working musicians out into the world, not necessarily forward-thinking artists. Okay,
I have to stop there, because that's I often said that about my own education. I spent 2 years at Bard College back when it was pretty dysfunctional, and now it's actually a really good school. But I used to have the exact opposite thoughts. Like, man, everybody was encouraging me to be forward thinking, but God, my mastery of fundamentals, out of college was sorely lacking.
Yeah.
So where's the balance there?
I don't know if I can answer that. That's really hard. I feel like fundamentals should always be taken care of first. I don't know. It's
some combination, right?
Yeah.
In the ideal setting, which may not exist.
There's a real rub because I think all the real masters of improvisation were also masters of the fundamentals too. It's something that Ted Poore said to me really, really kind of lit a light bulb in my mind. We were in a lesson one time and I said, you know, I don't really want to, when I play, I don't want to play scholarly, you know. I don't want people to think, wow, that guy's really studied. I want to play poetically.
Mm-hmm.
You know? I want people to have that kind of experience in listening to my playing. And Ted sat there for 5 seconds and I can almost feel that the amount of time that went by. And he said, isn't it interesting that poetry is just a mastery of the fundamentals? So I think there you go.
I'm not totally sure that's true. I think that there are people who don't read music and don't study in the traditional sense at all who become poets of the instrument or poets of the written word, but I think they're few and far between. And I think that if you're in a school, you have to learn fundamentals there. There's really no point in you being there.
Yeah.
But I think also to have a teacher that encourages you to take that deeply into your own experience so you can be yourself is a critical next step.
Sure. I think it's also up to the musician to decide what their fundamentals are for whatever kind of music they're making.
Yeah, which is hard to do when you're young.
Yeah.
So but I'm sort of diverting this into a very broad-minded conversation specifically. So what happened with you when you went to get your master's degree that was different?
Right. Well, I remember I was playing like a 175 style Gibson
Really?
guitar. Yeah.
That's hard to imagine right now for some
I
reason.
like semi-hollow instruments.
Were you playing standards?
Yeah, I was playing a lot of standards.
Wow. Do you ever do that anymore?
No. I mean,
do you want to, or are you just like, that's not me?
I think it's fun. But I still like what I was demonstrating earlier with the sevenths and the different intervals and stuff. I still use standards to see if I can do it over functional harmony.
Yeah.
Which is something that Kung told me also, just like his philosophy was the best way to work on improvisation in time is to learn how to play jazz. Melodies over harmony in time. You know, like there's kind of no better musical instrument.
Yeah, I later in life I came to that conclusion because I was a rebel like you. I don't need to learn jazz standards. Well, it did really help me.
Of course,
in every way to do that.
Yeah. So that was undergrad for me, was really trying to have mastery over that music. And then when I got to spend time with Kung and Ted, Kung was like, there's something else in you. There's an original artistic voice in here that's not being brought forward.
Wow.
So he encouraged me to get rid of the semi-hollow guitars.
Really?
Yeah, and I got
That's awesome.
I got a Tele, I got a Strat, and it makes sense because the music that I was listening to growing up wasn't jazz, you know. It probably like you.
What
like
was it?
Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and classic rock.
Yeah, but you're like half my age. How did that happen?
Well, I mean, I think anybody who gets into music has to deal with. Anyone who's my age playing guitar has to deal with that.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
I couldn't agree with you more, but most people in my, very random survey don't go that far back.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it would be very unsurprising to me if you had listed a bunch of metal players, for instance.
That music wasn't really on my radar. It could have just been the community that I was in or my parents, but my dad is a violinist. He listened to nothing but classical music. So yeah, metal music wasn't really around. It's funny because I listen to that music now from like an educated musician's mind.
Yeah.
And there's a disconnect for me because I just don't have that I don't have that young, childlike relatability to it, you know.
I'm totally with you, but I think you're in the minority for your for your age group.
Could be.
Wow. I mean, I've listened to a lot of your other work, and yeah, I would say all of it has a very distinct perspective and design, and man, I'm just in awe of your teacher for spotting that in you and encouraging it.
Yeah.
So what about your approach to rhythm, though? Because actually that was also something that was really striking about your record. I mean, a lot of people are using rhythm in a lot of different ways these days. How did you develop some of those pieces in terms of their shifts in time signature or pulse? Or, I haven't looked at the scores, but it's definitely not just
4/4
or linear 16 bar forms or anything like that.
Probably spending the last 3 years playing Tim Berne's music
Okay.
was a big one. And studying his music, Tim's music to me is such a trip. I've been listening to him since I was 18, and I still feel like all of us, I'm just skimming the surface of its depth and width. But one thing that I did notice working on his music was how he exploits every parcel of a 16th note subdivision or a triplet subdivision. So a phrase isn't just taka 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 taka. It's da 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 or da 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 or da 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 da. Every different combination of different 16th note rhythmic combinations, and then also how a phrase changes in feel when you go from a duple to a triple.
Wow. So when I was preparing for this talk, I read some of Tim's scores.
Oh dear.
Yeah. And it really made me, because the first time I heard your playing was when Tim sent me this, somebody, maybe it was him, sent me the recording of you playing your transcriptions of his solo work, which I just thought, whoever did this is insane, because this had to have been so much work. It's one thing to play his written music, another thing to transcribe his parts, which was really kind of a heroic act. And I'm not being facetious when I say that, because it's like I'm staking out some new territory in the guitar by doing this. What made you decide to do that, and how has that affected you? Other than having you join Tim Berne's band?
It's funny because it came from a really distressing place, because it was May of 2020. So it was you were in Brooklyn in that time.
Yes, I remember.
It was hell on earth. I was stuck in my apartment, and I just needed something to do. I remember March, April, I didn't touch the guitar.
Yeah, wow.
I was really emotionally distressed by the whole situation. So getting back to playing, I just needed a big project, and luckily during that time, Tim released his solo saxophone recording. And like I said, I'd been listening to Tim's music since I was 18. I never know how he put it together.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh great, here's him just playing by himself, so I can just deal with one voice, and I'll get to two parts later.
Yeah.
And so that was how that started. And I can't say I think actually that's why when Tim and I play together now, we phrase together so well, because I almost know instantly how he's going to play a passage. If we're playing a melody together, I know where he's going to place it and how he's going to do it, or if I get ahead or go behind, I know how to smear into it in a way that it's always going to kind of lock up in my head.
Interesting. Wow.
But that was, that was really dealing with whatever this solo record that I literally note for note transcribed.
Wow.
And I'm hesitant to call it heroic because it was really, it came from a very traumatic time, and it was a very traumatic project too. So
yeah, well, I might be slightly hyperbolic.
Yeah.
But I think the point is that that music. I mean, he has a very distinct writing style and improvising style, which is probably, I'm guessing. Again, I haven't looked at the transcriptions, not friendly to the guitar in terms of how it's the ease of its execution. Can you, I don't want to put you on the spot with something like this, but can you sort of give our listeners a little sense of either one of those pieces or just improvise a little in a manner that conjures his music and some of what you learned from it?
Yeah, I can
tough to just kind of turn that on, but I mean, you already were kind of doing that when you started, but
I've actually, there's a piece that I'm planning on doing another solo recording of his music.
Really?
Solo acoustic.
One wasn't enough for you.
Well,
what's wrong with you?
Yeah, I know. I've been thinking a lot about this piece. Which is one of my favorite blues heads ever.
That sounds like guitar music to me.
It sounds
so
like
what I just said is obviously wrong because it's not. There's no way in which that wasn't friendly to the guitar.
Well, it's not.
Granted, it's a composition, not an improvisation.
Yeah, I don't think I could just whip out a Tim Berne improvisation or something. But there's the thing about Tim's music that I had to sink my teeth into. It wasn't necessarily the harmonic information, not rhythm in a way, yeah, but it was really just the phrasing. And he uses that word phrasing in a very kind of loose, general way, but it's like it's an attack, it's an intensity, it's a focus on which part of the phrase are you really like kind of honing in on. It's a length of a phrase, and it's really, Tim's a big basketball player fan too. And all these, he talks a lot about decision making and how these decisions have to be made at a very, very fast pace, milliseconds really, just like basketball players are dealing with a very intense gameplay and they're reacting and interacting very, very quickly with one another. That was the thing that I had to really wrap my mind around when I was playing with Tim. I feel like I'm a good enough musician to be able to play whatever intervals or whatever tempos or passages. I can just slow it down and then figure it out. But kind of the broader musical ideas, like phrasing, time, space, those were things that I really had to learn and get some lessons on stage.
Well, a couple of things. One is, I think this is one way that improvised music moves forward is instead of people transcribing Sonny Rollins, not exclusive, but I'm not talking about an either or here,
Yeah.
but instead of transcribing, one of the elders of bebop or post bebop, or somebody younger who's in your peer group, even if he's older than you. And so I think it's really great. I suppose I'd recommend that to any younger guitarist. Choose somebody that nobody has transcribed before on the guitar.
Yeah.
If you want to kind of branch out.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, after I saw you play with him, I got kind of a renewed curiosity about Tim's music. So I called him and I asked him a bunch of questions, and he said a couple of really cool things to me that I just want to share with everybody. That is, in the process of kind of working you into the group, and I'm paraphrasing here, he would say things to you like, don't try so hard to be like me, or like, don't just forget everything because you're just, you're thinking that you should do something that you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
I mean, those are sort of vague instructions outside of the box of the situation that you were in. But talk a little bit about that education curve for you, because I agree. I've seen many of his groups over the years. I think you guys have a really great chemistry. So what are some of the things that you might even be able to share with anybody about improvising that were part of this learning curve for you?
There's two that really stick out to me. One, the first one was we were working on some music, and I don't remember what the piece was, but he could tell I was getting in my head, and he said, "Don't think, just do it." And then I just did it. There was a moment where I was like, I just turned the brain off, and then just played, And I know that sounds simple, and maybe it even sounds a little trite, but I think the big lesson from that is like you have, when playing improvised music, or maybe any kind of music, you have to learn how to circumvent the head.
So true, yeah.
And
it's only trite if you've never incorporated it.
Yeah.
Because once we realize that that's the key, all the things that we worked on for endless hours start to bear fruit. And it's not a given. I mean, it's easy to get sort of a little paralyzed on stage.
Well, that's when usually the paralyzation comes from thinking. And I can't remember who said it, but maybe it was Mark DeCray, who also, that's the next lesson that I learned from Tim. I think Mark DeCray said something like, agenda and music never really go well together. And I thought that was kind of insightful. The other lesson that Tim shared with me was, he was telling me when Mark DeCray was getting his phrasing shit together, his approach to learning how he wanted the phrase on the instrument was to transcribe a bunch of soul singers. So Marvin Gaye, Otis Redding,
really?
Sam and Dave.
That's really interesting.
I thought that was really interesting.
I wouldn't have associated those people with Tim's music in a specific way.
Right. I don't know if this was Mark playing Tim's music, but just how Mark wanted to play the guitar.
I got that. Well, I totally relate to that. I'm always trying to play like a soul singer, actually.
I thought it was so brilliant, and I got so excited about that idea. So I went home and I started transcribing some Marvin Gaye. So I started transcribing some Sam and Dave, how they play and then I went to Tim and I was like, "Hey, I did this thing," and he was like, "You totally missed the point. That's how Mark did it. You have to find the way that you're going to do it."
How mean of him.
Well, but he's right. He's right. I mean, like, we all have to find our way of doing it.
I know Tim's a bit of a contrarian, so I would have put it a slightly different way. I would have said, "Well, that's good, but what's next?"
Right.
Because that was Mark's way, but I'm not sure you missed the point. I think that was probably really good for you. But You know, it's interesting, just as a aside from the conversation, to note that Tim's work with various guitar players is really kind of a feast.
Yeah.
Mark's playing. I don't know. I can't. Oh God! Somebody posted. It was in remembrance of David Sanborn. Somebody posted something that Tim recorded with him and Mark Ducre from the early '90s. It was mind blowing.
Yeah.
Like the sound of foghorns, I think was the name of the piece. And Tim was playing baritone, and David Sanborn was just playing unbelievably, and so was Mark.
Yeah.
And then he's played with Nels, and that was always fun to watch. And you know, a few others too. I've got an idea. I'm going to pick up the guitar and we're going to set our minds aside and free improvise. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Wow, that was fun.
Beautiful little piece.
Yeah. Hey, will somebody transcribe that, please?
That would be a feat.
Yeah, but it's really interesting to me what we just did, because for me, I was, you know, when I was thinking about what we might play when you came over, I thought, man, I have no idea what we're going to play, because we're not going to play a jazz standard. And I thought, wow, we'll probably free improvise. And I thought, I'm not going to prepare for this at all. And then working with you and just now and just talking about what we were discussing, you know, brought out a bunch of chords that I never play. And I think that truly is the magic of improvisation, and the thing that we were talking about, which is letting your subconscious guide you.
Yeah.
Because so much of what we do is getting locked in to some identity of who we think we should be or what we've practiced.
Yeah.
And we have this idea of what is expressive and what isn't.
Yeah.
And so much of our of who we are, I think, can get buried under the idea of what we think we should be.
Yeah. There's a part of improvisation and playing improvised music which I feel like I've come to terms with more often than not. If I'm on the gig, I don't go into it thinking this, but I sort of globally understand that this could suck,
Oh, that was the other thing Tim was saying.
Yeah.
Again, totally paraphrasing here, but just be absolutely okay with sounding terrible.
Yeah.
Just, you have to.
Well, and not letting yourself or your quote unquote identity get wrapped up in that,
That's really hard.
It's so hard because
especially if you're the leader, by the way. Well, as a sideman also, you're like, oh God, I've let down. This guy will never call me again.
I'm going to get fired. Everybody thinks I suck. Career's over. All those things.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. I really struggled with this in my late 20s, early 30s, because I'm still in my early 30s. But I often go back to this book that I read, Trying Not to Try, which is
I've never heard of that.
It's incredible. I think you would really sink your teeth into this.
This sounds like Zen in the Art of Archery, in a modern age.
So it's that meets neuroscience.
Oh.
And so, Chinese philosophy and neuroscience and kind of performance arts, and kind of what we were talking about earlier, when thinking gets involved or when planning gets involved, you often get in your own way. And just that phrase, though, trying not to try, is paradoxical, right?
Not to me, but yes.
In a way, right? Yeah.
I mean, I'm so used to those kind of phrases at this point in my life that I totally get it. But it's all a paradox.
Indeed, yeah.
So why not just call it that with the name of your book?
Right.
I mean, nothing that we think is true is necessarily true. So.
Right, yeah. Well, and a lot of stuff is illusory too, and...
You mean like everything?
Yeah, like everything, exactly.
I can't wait to read that book. When did it come out?
Maybe 2010-ish, sometime in that decade. Yeah.
But I also, I've made 25 records now, and I find that I get caught up in my own history, even though each of my records is different. I don't know about you, but first of all, making each one different is important to me. But I wonder how you feel about the fact that when you sit down to compose, which is a very stagnant act compared to improvising, how's your editor? Because a lot of times I might write something and go, oh man, and it'll feel good at the time. I go, oh, that's just me being Joel 2.1.3.
Right.
There's that again. I might improvise something and go, oh gosh, that's fresh. That really works for me.
Yeah.
But you said you found your way into your new record by doing a lot of improvising, and I just think that's so key for us as composers. And I don't care if you're a jazz composer or a classical composer. It's where so many of our ideas come from, and the invention of the tape recorder has just been of great benefit to me.
Totally, yeah.
I never remember the stuff otherwise.
It's fun. I was having this conversation with Reed Anderson a couple nights ago, who's one of my best friends, and we were talking about, who were we talking about? This composer, William Basinski, whose music I'm just peripherally in touch with, but he does a lot of degenerative tape music, so tape loops that just go on for quite some time and they sort of slowly degenerate. And he's made like couple hundred of these, you know, that sound very, very similar. But the idea is very strong, and then it's also balanced by the fact that it's a body of work, right? Like he's just allowed himself to do this a lot, you know. And we talk about like a body of work when we think about classical composers, like, oh, Haydn had like a bajillion symphonies or something like that.
Well, he was getting paid to do them all.
Well, yeah, I mean, the money thing is way different now. But,
yeah.
But we look at all these different, like, you know, all the different periods of like Beethoven or whatever. And yeah, they're churning out a lot more work than anybody I know, but still, that's a whole lifetime, and we're still hopefully in our infancy, right? I have to keep that in perspective.
Oh, absolutely. My perspective on this is going to be different than yours, for sure. But all along the way, I think that's just something that, well, let's put it this way. This is something I think you're already doing in your work.
I hope so.
You're combining your improvisational faculties with your, you know, writing it down faculties, and you know, coming up with stuff that really sounds like a combination of the two. So when you're improvising over some of these ideas, which are not entirely straightforward, and again, I kind of wish I'd asked you to bring a chart. By the way, are there chord forms on your charts, or just like Tim's, just notes?
One song has quote unquote chord changes, but there weren't changes written. It's more just, well, this phrase sounds like it's this harmony going to this harmony, and I just wrote them down just to give the improvisers something to play off of.
Yeah.
You know. Sorry, what was it?
Well, so I'm just, in terms of playing over your own music, like, what are you doing? Like, how do you, what's the trigger? Like, what's, if somebody says, well, Gregg, how do I play over this? What do you say?
I don't know. I'm still figuring it out too.
See, that's pretty cool. So it's not like you had a conversation with your sax player.
No.
Like, okay, let's have a go at this.
You should, well, you should talk to him about it, because
I'd love to.
He found a very unique way of doing it.
It sounds very natural to me, as does the rhythm section. And, you know, this day and age, people do a lot of amazing stuff, but I didn't take that for granted when I heard the record. And I'm guessing you didn't play a ton before you recorded that, as is our mode in 2024.
Unfortunately, I think we did 5 or 6 gigs.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Maybe. I mean, but over like 2 years, you know, so what, one every 4 months or something?
Yeah. You're lucky to do 5 or 6 gigs with the same group over 20 years.
I know. Well, if my professional output continues the way it has, we'll do the record release, and then it'll be another year till we play or something. It's just
absolutely. We don't want to break the mold. Hey, but we'll play a little. Like, I mean, I know it's hard without hearing the bass line and all that, but can you? I mean, if I were to sit here and play over some chord changes, in my mind I would be playing over them, and there would be some shape to it. Can you do that with your own music, even though we're not hearing the other parts, just so people get a little sense of how that sounds?
Is part of a tune.
That's really cool.
So the crux of that tune is this, which is like my version of like Eddie Van Halen, you know. Just using the hammer-on sound from an open string, and then the idea of a wide interval. metronome just to give myself, Krantz being the badass that he is, being able to play very free ideas but still mark the form. I think that's kind of where this music is leading me to. Is how do I get more free within 4-bar, 8-bar, 16-bar structures? Also sans chords. Not that I'm trying to sound like Wayne or like play.
But was he an influence?
Definitely.
Yeah. Good. Hey, more power to you.
Yeah, I mean, the more Wayne, the better. But now I'm also like, I can't listen to Wayne anymore because
a little too much.
Well, then I start doing the playing with the middle pickup and shit like that. But more just to like get. I'm trying to remove all the guitar, to use a 2024 word, influencers out of my ears.
Really? Excise that kill the Buddha, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's what Wayne did.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's rarely been a more self-directed musician.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple things I notice watching you play, and that is that you're exploiting the guitar for what it can do. And I always commend that to guitar players, because a lot of times, especially if you're trying to emulate a sax player or a piano player, you're not playing the guitar so much. And hammer-ons, hey, come on, that's something that helps us. Use it. String bends, slides, and all the rest. So when I look at what you're playing, even though it's pretty chopsy, if I might say I think it sounds harder than it looks, because you're using the guitar in a way that develops a lot of complex material in a way that uses your hand in a very utilitarian way.
I mean, music is also a tactile experience. And as much as of course we're all trying to sync the ear to our hand and like have that be just perfect, but sometimes it just feels, and this is something that I learned from Sam Decker, the sax player in the quartet, like if it feels good, like chances are it's going to sound good too,
It's so true.
And isn't that funny, and sometimes, I mean, the guitar is meant to do, or play more than one note at once, or hammer on, or I don't know what else is there.
Detune.
Like, detune, or
the vibrato that we can use.
Just all the different things. The thing is that like it's funny because like I said earlier, I'm doing another solo record, and like I just wish that I played the piano because of the range that the piano has.
I know.
And I think that journey is taking me to just reconciling with the limitations of the instrument too, So simultaneously exploring what the guitar can do, but also acknowledging, well, it doesn't have, 88, half semitones.
Absolutely.
So fuck,
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
The influence of Tim has become kind of more apparent as we're talking. Are there any other people? We've mentioned Wayne Krantz, Tim Berne, any other people that you feel as living artists, I should say, that are really important to you?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time with Frizzell when I was living in Seattle.
Oh, that's right. He was out there at that time.
Yeah. We were very close at one point, and he would never say that he gave me any lessons, but I feel like anytime I sit in the same room as Bill, I'm getting a lesson, not just in music, but in life,
Yes. The mysterious brilliance of the Jedi.
Exactly.
Well, can you be, or can you say more about that, what you just said?
Yeah.
To those who haven't sat in the same room as him or played with him.
I think just being witness to his excitement about music and his curiosity about music and how fired up he gets about the guitar. And, you know, I don't know if you had this experience, but a lot of people that I went to school with, or didn't go to school with, maybe a lot of people my age, we got somewhat cynical about jazz in academia. And I'm not sure how common of an experience that is, but it seems like the people that I play with seem to share that. Not everybody, and Bill was sort of maybe perplexed by that. He was just like, what? Like, music is a really cool thing. It's all good.
Yeah.
Like, what's that attitude about? And I had to sort of check myself on that. Like, what is that attitude about? And it was probably some kind of insecurity. It was probably some misguided cynicism or some kind of...
Well, yeah, he's got an incredibly positive attitude. But I think it's also the perceived failures of the whole way that it works as a business.
Well, for sure. Which has nothing to do with music, though.
It does not. And for us to separate those two things is one of the great efforts of our lives.
Yeah. I remember when I did some jazz camp when I was 16 or 17, and the piano faculty, I'm really sad that I can't remember his name, but I asked him, like, you know, I'm thinking about studying music, but I'm really scared about what that's going to look like. You know, I know being a musician is hard and this and that.
Yeah.
And he was like, he said to me, and this really latched on for better or for worse, but he said, I'd bag groceries if it meant that I could play my piano. And that sort of made an impression on me, like, well, I'm going to do anything that I can to be a guitarist or be an artist or be a musician on my own terms, you know. So the business aspect of it didn't really discourage me from pursuing it, you know.
Yeah.
Just because I was like, well, if this is the way that it has to be, then that's what it is. So
that's great. Well, there's a couple other things. You know, you have a really strong sense of time and feel and groove, and I noticed that, and patience in your playing, actually, which is a word I kind of want to highlight for anybody listening. Patience in your phrasing. Unlike a lot of us, you rarely, or if ever, I haven't seen you play that much. So as far as I can tell, you don't play too much, you know, which is, I think, very hard, not, you know, when you have a lot of technique like you have. And also, like Bill, that sense of time is, it doesn't present itself in an obvious way like Wayne Krantz. Like his unbelievable right hand and muting technique that's very out front in his playing. But yeah, you really have to kind of dig a little deep to see how amazing Bill Frisell's time is.
Oh man.
And you know, we don't need to get into that right now. But I see some of that in your playing. Can you talk a little bit about how you've worked with groove, time?
It's actually the part of my playing that I feel the least secure about. And that was really highlighted when I was studying with Ted Bohr.
Oh, well, lucky you for studying with a drummer.
I wish I had done more of that. You know, I was having this thought the other day, like, jazz school or music school, they make you learn piano proficiency, but they don't make you learn, like, the ride cymbal or the snare, you know. There's no rhythmic proficiency class.
Still, because I know there wasn't when I was growing up, and that has been to my detriment, you know, my whole life. Playing catch up with rhythm.
I know. And I finally, you know, I had to kind of switch my priorities, and this happened somewhat recently where I was just like, well, and this was a conversation that I had with Mark DeCray. He said, harmony's great, but it's so young. And melody's awesome, but it's very subjective.
That's pretty deep.
And
I better get him in here.
Yeah. Rhythm has been the fundamental since the beginning, you know. time. So,
Yeah, but what do you do to work on your time?
I mean,
Because
probably,
that's kind of one of the harder things to practice in a vacuum by yourself.
yeah, turn the metronome on, turn the metronome off, turn the drum machine on, turn the drum machine off.
Play along with Elvin Jones.
Yeah, kind of. Billy Higgins. Man, I was just listening to some rough mixes from this thing that Tim Berne and I are putting out, and I'm rushing like a motherfucker. I'm really frustrated.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
I don't picture you as a Russian guy.
I'm so on top of the beat or ahead of the beat.
Man, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I personally know very few people who drag. We all,
Yeah.
if we have any issue, it's usually rushing, isn't it?
Well, if there is patience being detected in my playing, it's probably because I'm trying to stop myself from playing.
Yeah, but I've watched you play, and you know how to breathe when you play.
Well, nothing's more annoying than a guitar player that won't stop playing.
No, but literally, I mean breathe. I mean, literally, I see you taking breaths as you play. That's pretty unusual. Mostly going,
yeah. I've been a practitioner of meditation for a long time, so
I thought so.
maybe that's where I'm glad it's working.
Yeah. Well, talk about yeah. Meditation is like rhythm. It's been around for a long time for a good reason.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I can deduce that to practice your time, anybody listening to this should meditate.
Well, I won't prescribe anything to anybody, but meditation has been really helpful for me. Not just to the benefit of music, but well, I guess there's really no different. I mean, just life. Like,
Yeah.
You know.
Man, I hear that. Well, maybe we could close out with another improv.
Sure.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about in terms of your new record that, just about the other players or the music or anything that you want to mention that, might make it enlighten the listener?
Yeah. I guess just acknowledgments and praise for the band and for you for putting it out and for Nels for writing about it.
Nice
And
liner notes.
really
Very
nice
personal.
Yeah,
he doesn't rant about that very often.
Yeah.
Rant like that very often.
I just feel really lucky that probably like all of us, just feel really lucky that we get to do it at all, and yeah, I don't take that lightly, so I guess just an expression of gratitude for people who put the time into doing stuff like this or music at all.
Yeah. Well, the AGS recordings is the sort of the purpose of the whole thing is to, in some tiny way, provide a home for people like you who are doing something new, rooted in the past for sure, on the guitar. And it's a very small but mighty community. Us guitar players who are doing this. So I really appreciate the fact that you're on this little fledgling label.
Much appreciated. Yeah.
Well, let me retune, since have you ever turn your string down and in the middle of a phrase and it's not actually in tune? You're like, maybe I'm just gonna have to keep it like that for the rest of it, and then you can't really play the low string anymore.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that way when I was in tune also.
Let me just try to avoid this note. That's almost impossible, right?
Exactly.
All right. Beautiful.
Wonderful, Joel.
Wow.